video of Adore You by Harry Styles, and to play this we're going to use our F scale. So we don't really need the full 2 octaves, but I'm going to go through the whole scale for you so you have a context for it. Feel free to skip that if you already know your F scale. Our F scale has 1 flat, B flat, and B flat, and the F scale is one of my favorites because you just get to go straight up. So F is going to be all our fingers, and then this pinky key right here. There is, just so we know, another F over here, this one. But for the scale, I like to do it with my right hand because if one hand is moving, I like to keep all the movement in one hand. Our first octave. B flat over here, the back key. For the first line, we just need the notes between C and A in our scale. So that's so, the 5th note in our scale. We're going to go up through our first octave, F, and up to A. To make that sound really fun, what we want to do is emphasize just a little bit that first note. When he sings it, it's not that's really pretty, and that's also a really normal way to organize a phrase in classical music, but because of the lyric, we want to emphasize the beginning, the first word, walk. He says very clearly with a little bit of articulation, and so we want that in our sound too. And then the next thing is, even though it is one idea, the first line, it's made up of 2 mini ideas that we separate with a little bit of a lift. It's the first one. And then our C really leads us to our F, which is another really common thing in classical music, our so leading us to our do. It feels really nice. His phrasing really helps emphasize that. And then the last thing that we want to be aware of for this first line is that we're leading to that F, and then we have to lead away from it. If I really just blowed normally, it sounds like I'm accenting the last note. Instead of releasing it more gently, and to do that, I'm going to emphasize just a little bit that same F that we just led to. And that's a little bit of a decrescendo. So my air support has to stay really smooth and good, but I can also decrescendo so that I'm not emphasizing notes that I don't mean to emphasize. And then our next line, I get so lost. And then you'll notice I also emphasize the end of the phrase. This time it's a G, but I'm going to emphasize it just like I did in the phrase before so that you don't overemphasize the notes that come after it. He does a really lovely job of letting his pitches just slightly slide, and it's a lot easier to do that with your voice than it is with the clarinet. We can slide in some of those extra notes. We just have to really make sure that those extra notes fit into our phrasing and don't interfere with them. So we want to match what he does. And then if you don't want to add in all those extra notes, I added in an F and an extra A. If you don't feel like doing that, you don't need to use the extra notes to get that phrasing. It's just one tool to do it. But you still want to have that same phrasing. So I'm emphasizing the G, and then the B flat is the note I want the listener to hear. But instead of leading to it with a crescendo, I actually lead away from it. And the listener goes, oh, I didn't expect that. That was really lovely. And that surprise is what we want them to listen to. So you can do that with the slide. But there's also a little bit of a decrescendo there. And then our last tag, that one's great because we just get to go from our F scale. F, G, A, the first 3 notes of our scale. And there's a reason we learn our scales. And then for our pre-chorus lines, we just get to use La, Ti, Do. articulation and the rhythm that you want to do there depends on which verse you're doing. And then the very last part, you don't have to say your mind. If you want to do the little extra stuff right before the chorus that's in the background, that's the top of our scale. So the main parts of making that phrase match his really great phrasing is that emphasis on the first C and then leading to the A. That's the main note in our mini phrase here. Walk through fire for you. And then like earlier, he is so great at adding in little melismas and decorations in there, and I think it's super fun to do that. If you don't want to, just stick with that phrasing and you'll get all those same effects. But if you want to be fancy and just have fun, we're going to add in some other notes from our F scale. And then, just like before, we're going to do them without interfering with the phrasing. Use them to add to the phrasing. So when he does that, he sings Adore You with that little trill, that little voice trill in it, and we can do it overemphasizing those notes, and it still sounds really cool, but that's not the effect that he is getting, and so it's not the effect we're after. That's a really nice phrase, but it's not the one that we're looking for. Compare that to this. And I did that by making sure I still emphasized that A, and then continue the decrescendo after emphasizing that note when I added in my B flat. And that follows the same phrase structure as when I just did A to G. So your air is really the same no matter what you're doing. You just get to add in some extra finger movements if you feel like it. And then we're almost done. So we just need, like at the beginning, the notes between A and C. Those are the exact same notes that we used earlier. The very last new thing we need to learn is the second time he says, it's the only thing I'll ever do, he does a variation. But luckily for us, we just get to go down our scale starting on C. And that's it. You can experiment and phrase it in slightly different ways if you feel like it. Have fun. Remember, when you're adding in extra notes, if you stay in the scale, you can add in extra notes pretty much wherever you want. The thing with adding in extra notes is they're going to add decorations and they're going to call attention to the listener's ear to that note. So when you're emphasizing notes with decorations, make sure they're notes that you actually want people to listen to. You're all set to have lots of fun playing with and experimenting with Adore You by Harry Styles. I'm Jessica. I love pop music and the clarinet, and I make these videos so you can love them too. I go over notes, fingerings, phrasing, technique tips, and so much more, so feel free to skip around and take what you need and leave what you don't. And just have fun playing great music on your instrument.